So we have some important news in the battle right now to end the NFA's restrictions on suppressors. This all comes after the Trump DOJ changed their position on suppressors, and they argued that they are in fact protected arms under the Second Amendment. But the Trump DOJ continues to argue that the NFA and its suppressor restrictions can be upheld. The Fifth Circuit has essentially agreed with them, covered for the Trump DOJ, and now this case is heading to the Supreme Court. So let's talk about what is happening in this critical case. Now, before we jump into this video, if you guys want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to subscribe. Also, double check to make sure YouTube has not unsubscribed you. And then also, I want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is First Form. You guys know that First Form is an amazing company. They're pro-freedom, pro-America. They support the Second Amendment. Owners of there, like Andy Versella, believe in a lot of the things that we believe here on the channel, but also they make amazing supplements. So if you're trying to get healthier, maybe if you have a New Year's resolution, check them out using the link down below. And if you use that link and you order any supplements, you can get a free 5-pack of protein sticks. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be discussing a suppressor challenge that was recently ruled on by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The stakes in this case just got even higher because of essentially what the Fifth Circuit ordered in this case. This case is called U.S. versus Peterson, and it deals with the constitutionality of the NFA as it applies to suppressors. Now, Mr. Peterson in this case challenged his conviction of violating the NFA based on a theory that the NFA and the suppressor restrictions that are enforced through the NFA are in fact a violation of the Second Amendment. Now, on first review of this case, the Fifth Circuit 3-judge panel found that suppressors are not protected arms at all, and therefore they do not trigger 2A protections. The Fifth Circuit recently issued a new decision in this case, and the 3-judge panel ruled that even though suppressors may be protected arms, for this case they conceded that they are protected arms, they still found that the NFA's restrictions do not violate the Second Amendment because they believe that this operates as a shall issue permit. They believe that some dicta in the Bruin case issued by Justice Kavanaugh talking about shall issue CCW permits allows the NFA to operate this way. They claim that it operates objectively and as a shall issue permit. That, of course, is shocking and very concerning and has broad-reaching implications for other 2A laws and issues going forward. And now, in response to all of this, in that new ruling by the Fifth Circuit, Mr. Peterson was seeking Fifth Circuit en banc panel review, but that was denied. The Trump DOJ submitted their response to that petition, arguing that the en banc panel should simply reject this case and allow the lower court ruling to stand, including that whole shall issue permit analysis. Because of that, the Fifth Circuit en banc panel denied review to this case, and of course that's not good, and we continue to see a very large trend from the Trump DOJ where they argue in favor of the NFA. The Fifth Circuit ultimately, like I said, denied review to this case, and really that put Mr. Peterson in a very serious situation. Mr. Peterson, because of that lower court conviction and him being out on bond, and the Fifth Circuit denial of this case, was facing potentially having to report back to the court and potentially go to prison. Because of that, he asked for the Fifth Circuit to put a stay on the mandate because he intended to go to the Supreme Court and ask for the Supreme Court to take review of this case. However, the Fifth Circuit decided to deny that stay. They essentially did not care that this would have, serious implications for Mr. Peterson, even though he was going to take this case to the Supreme Court. They said, no, we're going to issue the mandate, and that put Mr. Peterson again in a very hard situation. The potential that he would have to report back to prison, even though he had an active cert petition to the Supreme Court, was brought up as a reason why the Fifth Circuit should stay that mandate, but apparently the Fifth Circuit did not care that the Supreme Court review was going to be sought and that Mr. Peterson would have to report back to prison because of that order. However, luckily for Mr. Peterson, he got the district court, kind of the lowest court here on the chain, to issue an order allowing him to remain out on bond pending the Supreme Court cert and the resolution of this case at the Supreme Court level. Now, for those not aware, in this case, essentially back in 2022, both federal and state law enforcement officers executed warrants at Mr. Peterson's home in Louisiana. He had a home and a home-based FFL, and there was 50 law enforcement officers along with ATF agents that, executed a warrant and raided his home. Now, that search warrant was based on some issues with potentially some record-keeping errors, some issues with 4473s, and then they also stated that there were some firearms that were sold at that location that later were found at some crime scenes. But really, out of this entire incident, it is the possession of a single solvent trap that was not registered under the NFA as a suppressor that led to this conviction. In response to that charge, because he had that solvent trap, Mr. Peterson filed a motion to dismiss the charge based on the Second Amendment in front of the lower court. Now, on review, that lower court denied his motion to dismiss the indictment, and that led to Mr. Peterson needing to appeal up to the Fifth Circuit for a reversal. Now, on original review of this case, the Fifth Circuit ultimately sided with the Biden ATF and Biden DOJ. The Fifth Circuit found that a suppressor is not a necessary accoutrement of a firearm that is required to make the gun useful or functional. Mr. Peterson and his counsel then decided to file for a rehearing en banc to the Fifth Circuit, when Biden was still in office. But like I mentioned, that petition was later pulled, and the original ruling by that 3-judge panel in the Fifth Circuit was also pulled because the Trump DOJ, of course, took control of this. Then they shifted position on suppressors, and they admitted that the suppressors here are protected arms for the purpose of the Second Amendment. Now, that was a critical shift in this case because the Biden ATF was arguing that suppressors are not protected arms at all. That then forced the Fifth Circuit 3-judge panel to take a new look at this case. But even after that drastic shift from the Trump DOJ, the 3-judge panel still upheld the NFA's restrictions in their recent ruling. The Fifth Circuit still ruled that the NFA can regulate suppressors since the process in their eyes operates as a shall issue permit, which they believe is permissible under Bruin. Under Bruin's dicta issued by Justice Kavanaugh, CCW permits may be generally permissible if they apply objective criteria like background checks, fingerprinting, low fees, and things like that. But here the Fifth Circuit essentially twisted the Bruin CCW permit decision and the dicta issued by Justice Kavanaugh, and they used that to justify the NFA's registration and taxation scheme. That is why this ruling is so concerning. In essence, the Fifth Circuit's holding now stands for the proposition that any permit system restricting 2A rights may be allowed as long as it operates objectively. However, that decision is now heading to the Supreme Court for review. Now, originally, like I mentioned, Mr. Peterson and his counsel were seeking an en banc panel review, but that was quickly denied. And then the Fifth Circuit also decided to issue their mandate in this case, allowing the ruling against Mr. Peterson to go into effect. And they did that despite the fact that Mr. Peterson asked them for a stay on that mandate because he told them directly that he was going to file for Supreme Court review. Mr. Peterson, in response to all of that, decided to then go to the lowest court, the district court, and also ask for them to, extend his bond, extend his release, and extend that for the pending resolution of the writ that is going to the Supreme Court. And luckily, the district court granted that motion. The order from the lower court stated that it is hereby ordered that George Peterson shall remain on bond under the same conditions and within the same stipulations as originally set by the court, pending resolution of his petition for a writ of cert to the United States Supreme Court. And then they stated that if appropriate, the court will set a new self-surrender date following the proceedings at the Supreme Court. So that is good news for Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson and his counsel now have, I believe, 90 days, so until March, I believe, to file for the Supreme Court review and ask the Supreme Court to step in on this issue. This is a critical case, not just because of the whole NFA and suppressor question, which would impact everyone nationwide, but also it is a high stakes issue also for this individual here. Any inaction by the court may lead to Mr. Peterson facing serious prison time because of how the NFA is currently operating. So that's what's currently going on in this critical suppressor challenge. We will now see how this plays out at the Supreme Court level and ultimately if they decide to step in. And hopefully for Mr. Peterson, that happens and we get a positive ruling, not just for him, but for everyone nationwide. So unfortunately, that's where this case currently stands. As we get more information, as it develops more, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to like, comment, and subscribe. You can also check out one of the 2 videos here on the screen that the YouTube algorithm thinks that you'll find helpful. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.